Hi, I'm Neil from Forge Ways, and today I'm doing another coiled flail video to show you how to make a spatula from the woods. Today, the minimum tools that we need are a hammer, a rubber mallet it's fine, but not a metal hammer. We've got a simple pruning saw. This one's one made by Silky, really efficient, great tools. Even if you're not carving, brilliant to have for garden work or out in the backwoods. We've got a Sloyd knife, which is a long, thin carving knife. It's made by Mora, a Mora 106. And I've got a carving axe, but this one's just a cheap backhoe hatchet bought online. So just those four tools and a chopping block to work on. And other things that might help today: a pencil for those creative spatulas you're going to draw, or either a favourite spatula to draw around, or if you're not very artistic like me, a nicely machined template of your favourite spatula to draw around as well. So that's what we need. Just those tools are the basics, and then I'm going to run through how to turn some chunks of wood into a spatula. Oh, just a quick apologies. You might hear Ash, my noisy collie, in the background of some of the video. Okay, so we're going to use some goat willow today to carve our spatula. I've got a bit of branch, sort of 2 to 3 inch diameter branch, and I've got a chunk that's from a bigger round. Now, goat willow in these woods, I'm in sort of Midwest Wales. These woods, there's lots of goat willow, and it's quite a soft wood, and it's quite easy to carve if you're a beginner. So other woods, we might have sycamore, that's a good wood to try. Lime's a very good wood if you live maybe in more of the Midlands in suburbia, so lime trees. And then moving on to birch is a good one. Ideal if you can get fruit trees, cherries, apples, they're all good for carving. But then if you are a beginner, stay away from things like ash and oak and beech, because they're very dense hardwoods that are a little more challenging to carve. It's best to get the safe cutting techniques mastered first. But yeah, like we say, goat willow today, and we're gonna split this now with the axe. With my branch and most wood, it has something called the pith in the centre, or somewhere near the centre, depending on how the tree's grown. And that's a slightly spongy sort of small dot in the middle. That's where we're going to have to split right through that pith, because the pith might create cracking later. So I'm going to take my axe. I'm going to put my axe so it runs through the centre of that pith. I'm going to hold the axe crossways in front of me. I'm not having it pointing towards me. So if I split, I'm going to hit the back of the axe. If I split, if it has a bit of a whoopsie, it heads off to the side and not in towards me. So I'm going to place the axe on the top, running through that pith. I'm fairly central through the middle of that branch, and I'm going to give it a couple of light taps. And it's just got the axe head embedded in. Now I'm going to give it a couple of bigger hits, and that should cleanly split this in roughly 2 halves. Okay, so the axe went off to the side, no issues there. So there you go, split in 2 halves, and you should be able to pick up on the camera this pith. It shows as a dark line. So that's perfect. So that's what you're after. I only need 1 half for one spatula. So I've just put that one to one side. So I'm going to try and cut this piece in half again. But I want to try and split it so there's the same volume of wood on either side. It's a general rule of thumb when you're splitting. You split things in half and and in half again. So again, place the axe on, crossways my body, couple of light taps just to get the axe head embedded in, and then when you're ready, a couple of bigger hits, and there we go. So I've removed more wood from that one, so it's getting closer to a thin plank. This one's gone a little bit too thin and it's got the pith, so I'm not going to use this half, I'm going to use this half to make my spatula from. So the next step is, like I say, is we're going to try and create that 10mm thick plank of wood, mini plank of wood. So now, using the axe, I'm going to try and chop all the excess material away to get it down to a plank. I'm going to start on the outside, and I'm going to do some stop cuts first. When I'm using the axe is generally going to travel in that vertical plane. I move the wood if I need to change the angle. I don't change the angle of the axe very much. You might see it move a little bit. So, holding the wood at just off 45 degrees, I'm going to just put some vertical chops in. Now notice there, I've stopped here. I only work on 2/3 of the piece of wood, and then later on I'll turn over and I'll work on that other third to half that I've not chopped. I don't chop all the way up to my fingers for obvious reasons. Okay, so I put those 45 degrees and I put some of those vertical stop cuts in. Now I'm going to bring the wood up slightly more vertical, and then trying to hit behind this first sort of scale or flake of wood here. I'm going to just keep gently chopping down behind that point. So I'm taking off, I'm almost planing a flat bit of wood on the back, and that's quite quick. So I want to do this bit. I'm going to turn it up. You'll notice I'm holding the axe sort of just above centre. I might sometimes creep up towards the head. I'm never holding it here. There's no marauding Vikings. I'm not going to swing it like this. It's all nicely controlled. So where you feel comfortable, somewhere between the middle of the axe and the head. So 45 degrees. Do some stop cuts, just loosen the fibres. And then I'm going to try and concentrate to try and hit that axe at the same point behind this chip that I'm curling off. You see, I'm starting to create a flat top there. So we'll just keep doing that for a bit longer. Every so often you'll see me just stop and have a look just to make sure I'm taking material off in the right area. So yeah, I'm still a bit thick at this top end, so I'm just going to continue until I get to the correct thickness. You'll see here that I'm sort of working on half the piece of wood at a time. Even for a relative pro like myself, it's really hard to plane the whole width in one go with all the axe. So I'm breaking it down into a smaller bit. So I'll do that side and then I'll do the other side. And if there's a little ridge in the middle, I can take that out easily after. But don't worry that you're not creating a chip across the whole width of the plank at once. I'm getting close to the thickness that I want now. I want to remove this bark and I'll just square up the sides just to make the next step a little easier. So it's still the same process. Put a couple of those stop cuts in at 45 degrees, then tip up a little bit higher. And I just plane those away. So remember, you can always take more wood off. You can't stick it back on very easily. So my next stage, once you've got to that plank stage, is to draw your design on. It's not necessary. I find it helps me to see the shape a bit clearer, and it's just a little easier for me. So I grab my pencil, and like I say, either grab a favourite spatula that you really like in the kitchen to draw around, or you can maybe have a template that you've drawn on cardboard, or sort of a piece of plastic milk bottle or something like that make good templates. And I'm literally just going to draw around my template onto the piece of wood. So a couple of things to note really. So wood has a grain direction. So it's like a tightly packed group of straws all bound together. So in this piece of wood, I've got all the fibres, all the grain is running top to bottom through the piece of wood. It's quite difficult to see on this goat willow. What I wouldn't want to do, I wouldn't want to put my template or draw my spoon on a funny angle. I'm trying to get the grain, obviously there's a line drawn on this template, I'm trying to get the grain of the wood to run from the very top to the very bottom of the spoon. It keeps it nice and strong. If I get grain that's running across diagonally at the neck, it creates a weak spoon. So we're trying to avoid that. And also, if you've got a bad knot or something on the piece of wood, I've got something here, I can maybe put it at the handle end so I'm removing it as part of the process. And don't worry if your template's a bit wider than the piece of wood, you can just draw a smaller shape. But yeah, I'm going to use this. I think I'm going to use this spatula to draw around for today. So we didn't chat about how old the wood was. So the goat willow we're using today has been cut down in the last couple of weeks. I'm using green wood, so anything that's been cut and is sort of anything from just cut to about 6 months old. If it's been sat out through the summer and been sort of in direct sunlight and we've not had much rain, and it's probably a bit too dry. I want the moisture in to make the carving easier. I've decided I'm going to use the head from one spatula and the handle from the template, but you could just freehand anything on that you like, to be honest. There's no right or wrong way or shape. I could use this plank of wood as a spatula in an emergency, so we're almost part way there. The next thing I want to do is if I've got a too long a piece of wood, I want to cut it to length, to the spatula length, and I want to put in a couple of stop cuts. With the saw, I'm going to cut across the top of my piece of wood to make it the right length. And then I'm going to put at the narrowest part of the neck, I'm going to saw in 2 stop cuts. You can hold the piece of wood if you like, lean down, but safety wise for me, I much prefer to clamp it down with my leg. I like to lean on my knee, then I can really firmly hold it down. But I just need to start the saw off. So I just put this thumb on the back of the saw and very gently, and when it's just starting to cut in, I like to take my hand away and I lean down. And this way I've got my hands completely clear of the blade, no damage likely to occur to my fingers. So that's it cut to length. I'm going to cut these 2 stop cuts in now. Might be difficult to see on the camera. Clamp it down my foot, thumb on the top of the blade until it starts. Move my hand away. Now I need to try and cut through quite vertically. I don't want to be a long way through at the back and a short way through at the top. I want to be the same front and back through the piece of wood. And I want to saw until I'm just before my line. So because I've got a bit either side, I have to swap legs. It's the same again. I'm going to clamp down with my foot, put my thumb on the top of the saw until I just start cutting. So there you have it. I've got it cut to length and I've got 2 stop cuts. So we're going to use a battening method to get rid of this excess wood and get it closer to a spatula shape. So using the axe, I'm going to try and remove these sections of waste wood either side of the handle. And there's a very quick way to do it, but it's quite explosive, and sometimes this method might dictate what shape your final spatula turns out rather than what you were planning. Essentially, I'm going to place the axe on the wood and I'm going to be outside of that stop cut. I'm not going to be inside the stop cut, I'm going to be outside. So again, I'm going to put the axe across from me. So I'm going to put it down the side of the handle. I'm making sure I've not come this side of the end of that stop cut. And then light tap again. I did say it was going to be explosive. And there, look at that, with a couple of hits, I've already taken a good chunk of that wood away with very little effort. So I'm going to repeat the same for the other side of the handle. A couple of little taps just to bed the blade in. And then not quite so explosive that time. There. So now, using the axe, I'm just going to take a little bit more of that material away on the handle and get a little bit closer to the line. It won't surprise you that I'm going to use exactly the same method, still chopping vertically with the axe. I'm just going to move that piece of wood. I'm going to go gentle now because I don't want to be smacking the head of the spatula with the axe because I might start some cracks. You notice I've moved my hand up towards the head of the axe and I've almost put my finger up on the side as well. It just gives me a little more control. I want to round the corners of the handle and the 2 tips up to the spatula. Now, the easiest way to do this is with a bump cut. So I'm going to place the axe onto the wood, sort of 45 degrees to that corner I want to take off. I'm going to bring them up together and down together and literally just bump off that corner. I'll show you again. Axe on the piece of wood, bring them both up together. And if I do it really pronounced, I can take a really big corner off. So then same up on the top. And if I need to do it a couple of times to get more of a round, that's okay. There. And the only bit left now to make it finally start to look like a spatula are these corners. Sort of the transition from the head into the neck, and they can be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to hook my spatula on the edge of the block here just to try and give it a bit of support, and I'm just going to very gently, I'm going to nibble a little bit away of the corner, and then I'm going to start on the next edge, and then I'm going to come back onto the back edge. Then I've left a ridge down in the middle, and I'm going to take that one. I'm not trying to do really big powerful strokes because I don't want to hit the handle. That's one. I'm close enough for the lines there. I'll be able to clean up with the knife in a minute. So I've got a little bit less to hook on. I can put the end of the spatula on the block. It becomes a bit more wobbly up here. So yeah, down there, whichever you find more comfortable. There you go. So starting to look like a spatula that way, but I've still got quite a lot of thickness of wood. So before I put the axe away, I'm going to try and get some of that material away with the axe, because we use the most efficient tool first. So it's a lot of effort to remove a lot of material with the knife. So we're going to stick with the axe, and we're going to take the head's thickness down. I quite like a chunky handle, but yeah, we can also use the axe to take more off the handle if we want as well. So it's a simple task again. We're just going to vertically chop. We're going to put a few of those stop cuts in, and then I'm going to move up quite vertically. And same as before, I'm concentrating to try and hit the axe behind that top sort of flake or chip of wood. So we're sort of planing and peeling that chip off at the same time. And we're just going to do that to take the thickness of this head down. Might take a little bit off the handle. Okay, I think that'll do for the axe work now, and we're going to move on to the knife. So now we've finished all the axe work, we're going to move on to the knife to get closer to our lines really, and just refine the shape, and then remove the last bits of wood that we don't want, and we'll have our spatula. But just a quick tip on safety on these knives. I don't want to hold my hand in the middle and then pull the knife out the sheath, otherwise I'll end up cutting across the back of my fingers. So top tip with knives and sheaths is either pull at both ends, or you can just click it off with your thumb. So a couple of different styles of cuts then that we're going to need to refine this shape. So the one I use the most is the thumb push. So I'm going to use the hand that's holding the wood, its thumb, to push the back of the knife blade. I'm not going to really move my right hand holding the knife at all. So I've got a curve here. I want to make this more of a pronounced curve. So I'm literally going to put the knife on, push the back with my thumb. And I very quickly just created that curve. I've got a slightly smaller curve on this side of the spatula, so I can either do the same or I can use the thumb pull, which is, as if I was going to peel potatoes. Maybe people of a certain age will remember. I'm essentially going to use my thumb on the wood to pull that knife into the web of my hand. So just to take the tip of that top off, and just flatten that off, and then I can go back to creating the slight curve with that thumb push. Knife on the back of the blade, and then I'm happy with the top shape, so I'm going to move on to inside the shoulders. So again, that thumb push, pushing on the back of the blade, and I'm going to have a slight rotate with my wrist now, so I want to try and track a slight curve. So I'm pushing with my left thumb and I'm rotating with my right wrist. So same on the other side. Got two even bits at the shoulders. I've got the top how I like it. I want to sort of shape the handle now really. So although it's quite square, I'm going to keep it in square until I'm in the lines, and then I'll turn it more into a cylinder. but I need to cut the direction of the grain. If I try to cut down, because this end, the bottom is slightly wider than the thinner neck, when I take my knife down into it, I'm just going to start cutting into the grain and start separating them apart. So I need to come from the fat bit to the thin bit to get an even cut. Now to do that, I'm going to do the sort of the pull towards me cut, which requires me to push the wood into my body somewhere sternum or above my belly button, whichever is the least uncomfortable position. Then I'm sort of making a fist and the sharp edge of the blade's facing me and the point slightly away, and as long as I keep my arms in, I can't cut myself here. So I'll bend over so hopefully you can see a bit more, and I'm going to pull my arm down like this, down the length. Down the length of the handle. Let's take that a little bit closer. And I can change over back to that thumb push. And then I'm going to just try and smooth out that transition with the thumb push where the neck meets the handle. And there, I'm close enough on that side. I'll do the same on the other side. So I flipped it over so I can't see my lines now. But yeah, pushing it into my chest, arm by my side. And then I've got a little bit where it transitions from the neck into the handle. And if you're a beginner, switching between all the knife cuts is really good just to give your hands a break. They'll quickly become achy using this thumb push. And again, just as I'm tracking that curve, this is getting a little bit of a twist. I'm getting a little bit closer there now. To turn this handle into more of a cylinder, I'm going to essentially cut across 45 degrees and take the sharp edges off, and it'll almost go from a four-sided square to more of an octagon. So again, I need to come from fattest bit to thinnest bit. So I'm going to start up the end. I'm going a little bit slower as the knife approaches the neck, just because I don't really want to make a mistake and jab the knife into the sort of the bowl or the head of the spatula. I'm just going to rotate round, do the same on the next edge. And then I just got some bits, I just keep working around now where I feel like I've got to take some material off. I'm getting pretty happy with the shape of the handle, but I want to neaten it up a little bit. So again, I use the same cut as pulling towards me, but this time I'll use the fingers to push on the back of the blade, just to give me a little bit more control, and then I can rotate this wrist at the same time, and I can just slightly emphasize that bit, and then I can just finish it off with a bit of a push cut. And there, sort of, this is turning out to be like a bit like a Smurf spatula. So really, the last things I've got to do to turn it into a fully functioning spatula, you can see all the axe marks, and I need to get and clean them off, so I've got a nice clean surface, and I need to just take the thickness down, otherwise it's not going to lift my favourite pancakes or fried eggs. So again, it's the thumb push. I've got a high point here now, and then I'm going downhill that way and downhill that way, so I need to change direction with my knife, so I'm always going downhill. So again, just clean up this bit. So without me rabbiting on at the camera, this can become quite a mindful and quite a therapeutic thing to do. And then I got some square edges I'm just going to chamfer off. Because we've used green wood that's got quite a lot of moisture in it, that now needs to dry for let's say a week, not on the dashboard of your car in direct sunlight, but somewhere, I don't know, top of a kitchen cupboard in the shade and without any breeze. And when it's dried, you can then get a slightly finer finish to the spatula by going back over with the knife, sharpen your knife up and go again. And then just to create that really fine edge, once it's dry, I'll use that thumb pull to just create a last chamfer right at the edge. With it being willow and it's got quite a lot of moisture, it might slightly curve whilst it's drying. So now, if you leave it a bit wider, once it's dry, you can use this to take that bit of curve out. And there, we've got a fairly functional spatula pretty quickly. You might ask about, oh, do people sand them? It'll work perfectly well without sanding, but if you want a lovely smooth spatula, then by all means sand. So yeah, start with a coarse paper, 120 grit, then go to a 300 and then maybe a 600 grit paper, and you'll get quite a fine finish. With willow, if it gets wet and dried again, it might start to go a little bit fluffy on the ends, but you can just carve that away. What I tend to do is, once it's dry and I've done my finishing cuts and it's nice and smooth, I do something called burnishing. So I don't bother sanding. I quite like some of the marks. I've got some antler that's sort of polished up and rounded on the edges. You could use a stone from the river, a piece of glass. People might have a pestle and mortar at home made from ceramic, but essentially I want something hard and smooth to push over the surface. And essentially I'm just squashing those fibres back down, and it'll go quite hard and shiny, and that will make it a bit more robust as well. So if you don't want to sand, you can just burnish, but there's nothing wrong with sanding. And then my spatulas get tons of use, so I don't really bother oiling them, because if they go through a wash or they get in a soup, then they take on stains of the food, or any oil that I get put on is soon cooked out or it's washed out. So by all means oil, but you want something like raw linseed, hemp seed oil. If you've got no nut allergies, then walnut oil is the best. Don't use anything like boiled linseed oil. That's got some nasty chemicals in it to make it dry faster. And don't use olive oil, because it won't really dry, it'll just go rancid. But there, I hope you've enjoyed watching me make a spatula and go away and create some wonderful spatulas of your own.